Your phone lights up with news of a dictator. You read the familiar comment that someone should just remove him. You almost agree. But that reflex hides a horrifying miscalculation. A story from ancient Rome exposes it. The real lesson is the opposite of what you learned. It began on a morning in Rome. The Senate House hummed with whispers. Men clutched daggers beneath their togas. Their target was Gaius Julius Caesar. They believed he had destroyed the Republic. He had seized power no single man should hold. So they chose the only act they thought could save their world. They would kill him. 23 stab wounds they delivered. Caesar collapsed at the foot of a statue. The senators fled outside. They shouted that the Republic was free. But the Republic did not return. Something else took its place. Something that turned the knife backward. The murder did something nobody predicted. It made the tyrant's rule permanent. Here is the chilling sequence. Within hours, the city began to boil. No one knew who was really in charge. The conspirators expected applause. They expected the old constitution to snap back. Instead, the Senate gathered for a tense meeting the very next day. The marble floor was still sticky with blood. A consul named Mark Antony sat in the chair. He had been Caesar's closest ally. He spoke words that froze the room. He proposed that the Senate ratify all of Caesar's acts. Every law he had passed, every office he had filled, every decree that had rolled off his tongue. The senators did not argue. They voted in favor. Now let that sink in. The same chamber whose members had held the knives now locked the tyrant's every command into permanent statute. Why would they do that? The first answer was naked self-interest. Caesar had stuffed the Senate with his loyalists. He had handed out governorships and priesthoods. Many of the assassins had accepted titles from him. If his acts were undone, their own jobs would vanish. The second answer was fear of chaos. Caesar's reforms had reshaped Roman life for years. His calendar, which your phone still echoes every July, was only one example. His most controversial move was pardoning his enemies and giving them authority. To revoke all of that would ignite civil war overnight. The legions were still devoted to Caesar's memory. Outside the Senate, a crowd was gathering. They had loved Caesar. They were already lighting fire for a funeral pyre. The senators heard the roar through the stone walls. So they chose to preserve Caesar's system while discarding his body. The motion passed with formal language. All acts of the divine Julius were now unchangeable law. Divine, yes. A comet that blazed after his death was read as his soul rising. The Senate soon declared him a god. A tyrant executed by the Republic was now a deity whose paper trail was sacred. This was not mere theater. It was the moment the Roman Republic legally died. Even though the title of emperor had not yet been created, the constitution was already empty. Caesar had pushed through laws that made him tribune for life. He had the power to appoint half of all magistrates. He gripped the treasury. He was named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator without an end date. When the Senate said his acts would bind forever, they etched his one-man rule into the state's DNA. The dagger did not scratch out a single line. It guaranteed those lines would never be scratched out. A Greek historian named Appian wrote about it a century and a half later. He recorded that the Senate confirmed everything, even unpublished measures, thereby ordaining a monstrous pile of illegal power. Say the biographer Suetonius noted that the Senate voted all his deeds should be valid as if they were law. The orator Cicero, whose private letters survive, saw the truth at once. He had not joined the killers, but he wanted the old republic back. Days after the murder, he wrote to a friend that the tyranny still lives, though the tyrant is dead. He recognized it before the body was cold. The system had already swallowed the man. You might think the conspirators were fools, but Brutus studied philosophy. Cassius was a hardened commander. They truly believed that eliminating the dictator would rewind time. What they missed was that the Republic had already suffocated long before Caesar. The old aristocracy had been devouring itself for a century. Caesar was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was a system where ambition had no break and the common citizen had no voice. Caesar addressed that by giving land to his soldiers. He canceled crushing debts. He rebuilt the grain dole. The ordinary people did not want the old republic. The old republic meant debt bondage and hungry children. When the conspirators cried liberty, they meant liberty for the oligarchs. The street heard a different word. That evening, the senators who voted to ratify probably understood they were betraying their own cause. But they felt trapped. Either nullify Caesar's rule and face instant rebellion, or lock it and bargain for scraps of power. They picked the second option, and they got nothing. Within weeks, Mark Antony seized the public treasury. Within months, Caesar's adopted son Octavian raised an army. He was 18. The Senate tried to use him as a tool against Antony. Octavian turned on them and marched his legions into Rome. He demanded the consulship. The Senate, now completely hollow, handed it to him. Then he became Augustus, the first emperor. The Republic never returned. All because the Senate, in its panic, made the dictator's laws eternal. Your textbooks might say Caesar was killed for wanting a crown. They rarely mention the morning after. They rarely note that the murder weapon was used to engrave his name into the legal bedrock of the next 5 centuries. Every emperor after Augustus pointed to Caesar's acts as precedent. Every autocrat in the Western tradition could invoke the legal fiction that a Senate had willingly given one man total power. The dictator had been physically obliterated, but his decrees were now untouchable. The assassins succeeded only in removing the one person who might have bent the system into something less brittle. Caesar was planning a vast Parthian campaign. Some sources say he considered restoring a few republican forms. He was a tyrant, but a flexible one. Augustus was far icier. He studied the lesson, clothed power in legal silk. And so the empire was built upon the corpse of a murdered dictator whose laws were more alive than he ever was. The horror is not that the assassination failed. The horror is that it worked in every dimension except the one that counted. They killed the man. They could not kill what the man had already written into the fabric of the state. Laws are not flesh. Laws are code. And once code is installed, it persists until someone else overwrites it. But the Senate that could overwrite it had already been overwritten itself. They were running Caesar's software. They could not delete it without crashing the entire machine. So they tapped accept. You live in a world crammed with such machines. The Constitution you obey is a set of code. The tax system you navigate is code. The borders on your map, the currency in your pocket, the algorithms that order your attention are all code. And that code was often written by powerful individuals who left their fingerprints on the logic long after they died. When you think about removing a dictator today, you are really picturing the head of a system. But the system is not the head. The system is the thick web of laws, loyalties, and incentives the head spun. Cut off the head and the body may thrash. Or it may quietly grow a new head that looks just like the old one. Or it may devour itself in chaos. The Senate that killed Caesar stood before that exact choice. It chose to keep the body and let the head be replaced by 1,000 statutes. The next time you hear someone say, just get rid of the leader, remember the marble floor. Remember the sound of senators voting not to erase the tyrant, but to engrave him. Remember Cicero's bitter ink. The stains on the floor did not matter. The ink on the parchment did. That ink has never dried. It runs through the way authority works. Through the assumption that a lone decree, once passed, becomes as solid as stone. Through your own feeling that the world is steered by persons and not by the rules those persons left embedded. But rules are patient. They wait. They survive. They shape the living long after the dead are clay. Your calendar still carries July. Your courts still cite precedent. Every law you live inside was once a choice some Senate refused to reverse. Out of fear, or convenience, or sheer exhaustion. So the next time you scroll past that headline, pause. The tyrant's face may glow alive on your screen, but the real power is in the code. And the code does not die with a knife. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel. A new story every week.